Welcome to the Agile Wire. Brought to you by Wisconsin Agility. We want you to get agile and stay agile. Now here are your hosts, Jeff Bubolz and Chad Beier. And we're recording. All right, kick us off, Jeff.
All right, we have Amber Field back on the podcast, one of our earlier guests, and she just finished a book, Agile Discovery and Delivery. So, Amber, great book. Why write it? What was the reasoning for writing this book?
Yeah, so I teach a class at UW-Madison it's our computer science capstone class. It's supposed to be the culmination of everything that the students have done throughout their computer science kind of degree careers, right? And what I'm really finding over my maybe last 20 years of hiring students out of college is that they don't really have a lot of the kind of people side of software development. They're not coming out with agile software development skills or knowledge, or not to the degree that, you'd really want them to. And I've noticed that, if we can get that information to them early, they'll be able to kind of hit the ground running once they leave, once they graduate and join in whatever company they're going to join or start whatever startup they're going to start. And so I wanted to kind of get this knowledge into the hands of early career software developers, maybe tech entrepreneurs that haven't been a tech entrepreneur before. Maybe you came from a different space, so that you don't have to slog through the 20 years of learning that the three of us have had to do as we kind of go through our agile journeys.
That's great. So the first part about it is Agile Discovery. So that might be a foreign word for some of our listeners out there. Some people, maybe we're talking past each other. It means something very different to a lot of different people. So what does that mean to you?
Yeah. So to me, it's all about how you figure out what to build. It's talking to your customers, finding out what their problems are, and then figuring out how you're going to solve those problems in a meaningful way for both you and for them. Mm-hmm. That's, to me, in a nutshell, that's what discovery is.
Yeah. And in practice, what we see a lot of organizations doing is like Google design sprints, or they start taking ideas from design thinking. And I think those are great things, because without that, you kind of tend to fall into like a feature factory where we're just going to build, and there's no measure and learn, right? But those are great ideas. I think putting some time on the calendar, having some structure around that is a great way to get started if you're not doing that today. But once you've done that for a while, I guess the teams that I see doing things very, very well, they're just doing that all the time. That just gets built in to every day in a sprint, and they don't need to do a Google design sprint because they do part of that every sprint. They're always learning new stuff, running experiments, validating with user outcomes, and they're really about focusing on the outcomes and impacts for the organization. What are your thoughts? Do you see the same thing?
I absolutely see the same thing. I think, with the class, we actually do section it off. We do about a month of discovery, and we do the rest kind of focused on delivery because of the time frame that we have. But most teams, if you're just getting started with this, there's probably a hole in your knowledge in terms of what you know about your customers. If you haven't had your teams going out and talking to them, if you've been relying on sales or the business, for example, you have to get out there and really kind of fill in those gaps as best you can in the beginning. And so with the class and with the students who are just learning this, we do have a focused, we run a 2-week Google design sprint because they're not dedicated. So it takes a little bit longer to get through it, where they have to talk to their target customers. They have to figure out what their problems are, and they have to work with their stakeholders to figure out, okay, what are we going to build? But then I also talk to them once we get into the delivery side of things. That's what we're all kind of thinking. When we're thinking software development, we think, all right, we're going to do Scrum and we're going to do Kanban, or, we're going to move forward and we're going to work in sprints and just hit it hard and get things done in a sustainable way. Well, that also includes, like you said, continuing to talk to your customers and continuing to validate what you put out into the field and then iterating on it. And so without knowing the basics of that discovery side of the practice, really, there's no way you're going to be successful as you kind of hit the actual feature production phases, right?
That's awesome. So I have a question about the book. And I know we've talked about this topic, the three of us, in the past. We've all facilitated self-forming teams and self-selection, right? But I was thrilled to see that you covered it in the book, because it is, I don't know if a stigma, that's not the right word, but it feels like it's this scary thing still inside of organizations. And I love that you're preparing, right? These are people who are going to leave this program, young adults, and join the workforce. And they're going to know what that phrase means. And I feel like, I don't know if that's going to give them an advantage, but I hope it's going to change the world. I hope the more young adults we like prep, hey, letting people decide what team they're on and how to organize is not the worst thing in the world. It works. It's totally going to be okay. Your organizational walls won't melt down around you when you do this. So I love that you have that in the book. You prepare, you kind of even paint a picture of what it looks like. I don't know if you went into all the details, but I don't know. I'm sure that you're happy that you put it in the book as well, but like any other, what drove you to do you feel the same way? I mean, because I know you're passionate about self-selection.
Yeah, I do. So actually I had it originally in the appendix because I am passionate about it, but I wasn't quite sure that it really fit in for the demographic that I was aimed at. Right. So I put it in there. We talk about agile teams. I think that's a really important part of the book. It's a really important part of the foundation of understanding agility. And my editor got a hold of it and she's like, this is amazing. This is something that's very different. It's counterintuitive. It really, like, more of us need to be thinking about something like this. And she was the one who encouraged me to move it up. So it was actually in it. I pulled it out, moved it back in. I'm really happy I did because, like you said, when you said this is going to change the world, I got really excited because I feel the exact same way. We think about the way that we work with others as being something that's basically handed to us at most organizations, right? Yep. Most people expect that. And in fact, when you try to introduce something like self-selection, where for those people that don't know anything about self-selection, it's basically an iterative process by which you can choose what you work on and who you work with. It's simple, but also revolutionary. And most of the time I get a bunch of folks on my teams that are just trying this for the first time come up to me separately and say, what I'd really like to do is just give you my top 3 choices and you pick for me. Like you pick for me. But what I am finding is students are much more open to new things. I don't know if it's their brains are just used to learning. And so they just learn about something, like they take it as truth and then they move forward. They don't really question it very much, which I think is a really healthy mindset. It's one that I think we get away from when we've been working for several years and we start to be a little bit skeptical because, this thing didn't work in the past.
Yep.
So I find that working with the students on self-selection is a breath of fresh air. I might have one that comes up to me and asks, like, could you just pick for me? And I say no.
Yep.
And I send them out into the world and we do the self-selection. And then almost 100% of the time, I've got everyone coming back saying, oh, I'm so glad you didn't pick for me. I'm really happy with where I ended up. So really, it's in the book for just to kind of plant that seed. I would love more people to go out into that workforce and say, you know what, I heard about this kind of interesting thing. And then I encourage them to go out and read David Moll and Sandy Mamouli's book, Creating Great Teams, which goes into much, much more detail on self-selection. And maybe they'll go do that and then they'll kind of plant the seed in their organizations. It takes a little while to convince most places to start or to try self-selection.
Yeah.
That's the hardest part.
I found when, you have people that are maybe a little afraid of doing it, you mention they're like, what? And then you're like, wait, but you get to create like the boundaries for this as the leadership team, right? So like the number of people, if it's like some kind of blended salary, you want to invest a certain amount in certain areas, like you can pick the number of teams so that you're putting your investments where you want. If you want like certain skill levels, like maybe you say like you have to be able to take something from concept to cash, a problem, and deliver it. So you're going to need all the different skills on your team and you need to make sure you have that accounted for. Like whatever the things are that you're worried about, you can put those as guardrails and then they have to figure out how to make that work. Right. So and then the great thing is the change happens fast And the change management happens like now. Like we don't have to go back for months and have all these backdoor conversations about, I wish I was on that team. I wish I was working with Susie. I wish I was working with this technology. You picked it. And so now you're bought in, and like the team's bought in, the people are bought in because they made that choice. So it's an amazing thing. I've got one client that right now that we did this a few years ago, and about every year they come in, like either they're adding more people or people have left, and they do like, let's re-examine this and say, do we need to switch? What are the guardrails? And it literally takes less than an hour now, and they can just like make some flips, and they just like are ready to go. And it's a normal thing in their organization. No one's afraid of it. It's just what we do about every year. And you can stay with the same team if you like it, but sometimes we're going to re-examine this. And it's really nice because they get to say, this isn't forever. I don't have to work with Chad the rest of my life if I don't like working with Chad. It's only going to be a year, you know?
No, you have to. But
yeah, well, I do, but
yeah, you're stuck with me.
But it's a really great thing. It's an amazing thing. It empowers people. And I think that it really does change the way we work. So
it really does. And I think you touched on something interesting there. You know, one of the ways that you can make people more comfortable with that process is by offering and saying, hey, we try this for 6 weeks. If you personally aren't digging the team, we can make some adjustments then. I've never had anyone come back and say they wanted to do that. But just knowing that you can change, and the fact that you're doing it on a regular basis, I think that's a fantastic model for how we might be able to set up teams almost everywhere. Do something for a year, eventually you learn everything there is to learn, and you'll want to change. And here's your out, here's your off ramp.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, when we think about org structures, like one of the biggest problems we have when it's like, well, we can't quite get that cross-functional team. It's because managers maybe are a little more protective of like, it's my skill set, my team here. And if we get used to like, we're going to reform teams, and you're still going to manage people, but like they're going to be working on whatever product they pick, and we're going to maybe even change that in the future. Like you become more of an adaptable organization that can respond very quickly, because this is a normal thing that we do. If something's painful today, like a change like that's painful, if you do it often, you're going to get better at it. It's like releasing, right? Like if you release once a year, it's going to be very, very painful and stressful, and a lot of things are going to break. But if you do it very frequently, it just becomes the norm, and it becomes very easy. So I think the same thing with this like self-selection. Like if we never do it, it's painful. But if we do it on some type of cadence, it's a lot less painful, and it's a lot easier, and it makes us more adaptable as an organization. Yeah.
And isn't that true for everything that we do, really? Yeah. Yep.
So I hope it makes a huge change. I think we're going to have to wait. I would predict we have to wait 10 to 15 years to see if that change takes, right? Because here's what's happening. And again, today we still talk to people in management roles who have never really even had that seed planted. They don't know about this concept. Right. And then when it's introduced, it's the scariest thing they've ever heard. And I'm not blaming them for that. It's just they don't know what they don't know, and they haven't been exposed to it. Until you've experienced it, it feels like, what's that phrase? The inmates are running the asylum. It feels like it's going to be chaos, even though we know it's not, because we've all experienced it. So I think what's going to happen, I hope, you keep writing books like this, you keep teaching courses and talking about it, others keep doing that, and 10 to 15 years from now, all these students, young adults, they're going to become managers, directors, VPs.
Yes.
And I've had this happen multiple times, especially with my graduate degree. I'll be like, oh, I remember in my MBA, there was a course, and I go back and I look up my notes and I look up some PowerPoints. And I'm like, oh yeah, there's this concept that was really cool. I hope they go back and they look at their notes and they're like, oh yeah, self-forming teams, right? And now they're a VP of an entire organization or a CIO, and they're like, we're going to reform we're going to redo the entire team structure tomorrow. Everyone get in the cafeteria and just reform teams, because they maybe remember it's not that scary. So anyway, I'm hopeful that will occur, and I'm glad that you wrote about it.
Oh, good. Me too.
I think going back to maybe one of our first points when we talked about before, like if there's one main point out of this whole book, it's like talk to your customers and get close to your customers as the people doing the work. And again, it's unfortunate some of the organizations, we see out there that they focus on keeping people very busy. focus on the activity to be done, and trying to make that very efficient instead of efficiently solving customer problems. And I think that's the quickest way to demotivate people. We talk about that in like being a pandemic inside of the world, right? Like so many people are just dissatisfied and not engaged at work. But the reason I think they're not engaged is because they're not close to the customers, which are the reason they exist. The reason they are there is to solve their problems. And so if they don't see the value of their work and how it helps somebody in the world, it's really easy to just say, well, what I do doesn't matter. And so I think that was a great point. And I don't know how we can get more people on board with that, but I think that's a key to keeping workplaces successful and keeping people motivated to continue to provide value in the world.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, I'm a fan of piloting things. So some of the things that I talk about in the book are, if you are in a position where you do talk to customers, you might be a product manager yourself, or you might be in UX, pull your engineering team in with you. And if they're kicking and screaming for some reason, have them sit in the room off camera and just listen, because even that gives you a lot of great context. And most people, I think, in that position eventually come up with questions, and either they feed them to the folks that are on camera or they pop in and ask. And I think that's a good way to start. And then once you experience that, once you get to hear, oh, this customer is using my code and this is how they're using it and it's really helping them, or, oh, this little thing is making their life hard and I know how to fix that, I'm just going to go off and do that. It can really change how you feel about what you're doing all day long, and it really helps you prioritize too. How many of us sit in meetings for most of the day and push off our work, and then we're tired at the end of the day, so we don't get to it. But the real work, the really important stuff, the closer you are to your customers, the better you can prioritize that hire, because you're going to want that rush of being able to go back to them and say, I did this for you. How's it going? How do you like it? Will you try it out for me? And I think one of the other points that in that realm that it's really important is that when you are talking to your customers, you can ask great open-ended questions all day long, but one of the other things you really need to do is put together your prototypes and put them in front of the customers and then watch them use what you're building and talk through what you're building. That is one of the best ways to understand how they're going to use it and what they think of it without, accidentally leading them down an answering path that you didn't intend. So, that's one of the things I like to share with the students. I have this slide that pops up all the time and it says, no one knows what they want until they see it, which is true. It's uncomfortable, but it's true. We all have an idea, but we're not, regular customers aren't generally up to speed on what technology can do for them. So, talking to them and uncovering and putting things in front of them and iterating is so, so important.
Yeah. Early in my career, I was working for this immunization registry. So we're trying to bring up immunization rates, especially in children. And it was through Wisconsin. And I didn't go to see how this is happening clinically. I'm like, they just give people shots. They fill in these, fields. We enter this stuff. We run these letters. We look at this data. We send to people that need the immunizations. Like, I mean, it's self-explanatory. Finally went to actually see one of these shot clinics where they're giving, like at a health department, tons of kids come in and it's like an assembly line. They're just giving kids shots like crazy, right? Like as they come through, but they have to go fast because they have so many people. And there was a feature where you could default the different fields inside of that they had to fill in, but they didn't use it. And so we didn't have to do any programming. All I had to do was be like, hey, did you know, like, if you can pre-fill all this beforehand, like it takes 5 minutes here, like now you could, instead of spending a minute filling in this stuff, it takes you like 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Like it's review this. Yep. Click OK. Like it's really that simple. And they were able to streamline that whole entire clinic because of that feature was there. They just didn't know how to use it. So sometimes you just have to be there as a technologist to say, hey, we already have this for you. We can solve this problem for you. And they don't even know they have the problem. And so just, you got to be there to see it, and if you don't see it, you're going to just keep building features that maybe people won't even use. So just another example of like every time I've done that in my career, it's worked out so well. Like you learn something as a technologist. You help a customer because they don't understand exactly how the technology works, and you bridge that gap. And that's really what we're there to do, is bridge the gap between technology and problems and help them figure out how to solve them, make people's lives better. So I don't know, I can't preach that enough to people. It's like, go and see, like, you need to know your customers and see how your product's being used.
Yeah, absolutely. I love those magical meetings where we're talking to our existing customers. For example, we did a whole healthcare campaign last year, and we'll get done with what we wanted to show them or ask, and then we'll ask them for questions, and they'll ask for something simple like, hey, where do I see which number my SMSs are coming from, for example? And oh, yeah, let me point you to the exact spot and let me help you get there. And they'll ask another question. It'll be an easy answer. And it's not hard. It's not hard to make a big difference in the way that your customers are using your tools.
Yeah.
All right, a few more concepts that got me excited. So, it's the final chapter, I believe, chapter 7, more key concepts and survival tips. But there's a few in there that I think they probably could have had their own chapter dedicated to them, I would imagine. You mentioned pair programming, and not just pair programming, but mob programming. And again, it's just one of those things that I feel like is still so scary when mentioned in so much of corporate America today. What? Mob programming? One keyboard and one screen for an entire team? That doesn't seem very efficient, is what you hear from a lot of people, right? And I love that you're exposing that idea to young minds. So as they enter the workforce, they realize that's something that's possible. Now, I hope they don't enter the workforce and their spirits are just crushed when they get their first job in corporate America, and it's, heavy bureaucracy and, we don't do mob programming around here, right?
Right.
Just be quiet and get your fingers on your own keyboard, right? I hope they don't get crushed, but again, they will excel through their career and they will become decision makers. And I think that they're going to have these concepts. And then the other one that I thought was great, and I love the phrase, it opens up the DevOps section. I'll read it verbatim from the book because I highlighted it. DevOps, like Agile software development, is a culture and mindset that's so often lost today because so many people think of DevOps now as tooling. Oh, you have to have a pipeline and a tool set up. No, in 1970, you could do continuous integration. You just had to have the discipline and mindset to do it. Now, is it easier today? Absolutely. But the tools, they didn't create this, it's been possible all along. So I love that you hit on those two key concepts.
Oh, I'm very glad to hear it. The back half of the class, what I like to do is I sprinkle in some things that I know the students haven't been exposed to. DevOps is a big one of those.
Yeah.
How many of us have tried to hire good DevOps people and have found it's really, really tough to find them? Well, the students don't know that career path even exists. So I usually bring in a guest speaker, my friend Sarah Willett, who runs a good chunk of DevOps at MasterCard, to talk through it. And inevitably after that class, I'll have a few students come up and say, I didn't know this existed. This is exactly the type of thing I want to do. I love tinkering. I love integrating things. I love trying out the new tools. I love making things more efficient. And I say, that's great. And we also talk about the fact that, the best developers for DevOps are your lazy developers. This is another quote from Sarah. I've got to give her kudos for this. It's the folks that don't want to do the same thing more than once or twice. So they automate it, right? So I think that's a key concept for people to understand, is that there are many different things you can do as a software developer. And this is just a specialization that gets some people really excited. On the mob programming front, that's super interesting. I hope, and I do tell the students many times, both in the book and the class, that, there are just some things that might be worth leaving your current company for if they're not going to support it, and a lot of the very basic tenets of agility, the trust and empowerment and, getting your teams to be dedicated teams. And here it's, if no one will allow you a couple of hours a week, because that's all it takes sometimes to do a good mob programming session. If no one's going to allow you a couple hours a week to team with the rest of your team, to solve a really challenging problem together, to sit down and look at things, and, it's great for teaching newer developers, dark and dusty corners of the code. if someone's not going to see why that's good, well, then maybe the mindset within your organization isn't as conducive to what it should be. So you don't have to stick around if you're not happy and you're not making progress and you're not doing the things and working the way that you want to. And I think that's also a really important point to tell everyone, really, is, sometimes the culture just doesn't fit, and there's places that would be happy to have you.
Yep. I love that message in the book as well. Kind of in putting more power into the employer or the employees side of the equation, right? Like, you don't have to work anywhere. Obviously, yes, sometimes, and I remember, right? I remember leaving college and you feel like, I really gotta get the job. I gotta get the job. And you don't want to wait too long, or maybe you were blessed and you got an internship right out of school, but it can be very stressful because when you interview at that age, right? What are you relying on? You don't have all the experience. You're just saying, I have my degree now. And so you're, I don't know, it can be hard. It can be hard to even feel the confidence at that stage. And you gain the confidence throughout your career when you realize that you are amazing when you're exiting school. You're actually likely better because you're more of a sponge and willing to learn. Whereas for some reason in corporate America, again, I'll pick on corporate America, quote unquote, we just lose this idea that learning is something that that should happen forever in an employee's career. But we think of it as this onboarding phase, and then it just ends, right? And then you've got managers with teams, and their teams are all specialists, and they're not very agile, and they're like, yeah, I don't have very multi-skilled people. Well, here's a quick fix: mob programming. Like, if you want to learn rapidly, bake it into every hour of the day, and it will happen. Like, it is not hard. The concept is it's right in front of you. If you want to learn something, you need to pair up shadow mob with people who have that skill set, and then you learn it. Yep. It's with anything in life. So I know for listeners, right? Obviously, yes, if you're reading Amber's book and you're early in your career, or even if you're not, it's there. But if you're struggling with the specialization problem, there is a very easy way to get out of it. Bake learning into every minute, hour of the day through things like pairing and mob programming.
And maybe you mob on something very hard, like Amber was saying, but maybe you just pair on everything. If you want to increase the multi-learning, just pair on everything. Make it a policy. For the next month, we have to pair. And we're going to switch pairs every day, every week, whatever makes sense in your context. I guarantee the learning's going to you're going to crank that dial up to 11 on the learning. Yep. And so that's a great way to accelerate that. And then you're more adaptable, right? As a whole entire team, because you can work in different areas and you can work on the highest valuable things. So what does it matter if you're really efficient delivering the wrong things or things that aren't very valuable? You're busy, but you're not providing value to the org. This is going to help you to be able to be very flexible to provide the highest valuable thing possible. And it takes time, but not that much time, a few months of pairing all the time, and you're going to have everybody up to a level where they can contribute in so many different ways.
Absolutely. And you've kind of come full circle here with this conversation, talking about the learning. We started off talking about discovery and how that never, ever ends. That's exactly what it is it's the learning phase, but you've got to bake it into everything that you do. And it's got to go forth no matter what framework or processes you're using or where you're at in your project. It never stops. And I think that's just a very nice, it's that idea of continuous improvement. And there's a couple of Agile principles that I talk about in the book that I say, I'm embarrassed to say this because they're like my children, but there are some of my there are two that are my favorites, and continuous improvement is one of them, and learning fits right in there. So absolutely.
So Amber, we're kind of rolling here and wrapping up. That was a great summary of our conversation. At this time, is there anything else you would like to plug or promote to our listeners?
Sure. I've got the book out. I actually have one right here. If you're watching, Agile Discovery and Delivery, it's on Amazon. All right. Awesome. And it's aimed at early career, software developers and maybe early tech entrepreneurs. But also what I'm finding is, people who are in kind of what I call a tech adjacent space. If you're in marketing or you're in sales within a tech organization, this helps you understand your teams that you're working with a lot better. And, I've had a few people read it who are married to engineers who come back to me and say, oh, this is what he was talking about. I understand. I have much better conversations with my wife or husband now that I've read your book. So, if you're sitting here wondering, who would be good to give this book to, for example, it's those folks. Given the fact that this book mirrors the class that I teach at UW-Madison, and we tend to work with partners, like corporate partners or nonprofit partners, to come up with projects that the students can work on in an agile way all throughout the semester. So if you're listening, and even if you're not in the Madison or Milwaukee area, we would love to partner with you. So if this is something that you're interested in maybe getting some work done that you can't get done, or recruiting, or just helping these students learn some of this material, I would love it if you would reach out to me and we can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So what you're actually doing in the class is we've helped out with the class and
you have, yes. Yeah. Both of you do such a great job.
Is something that you can do is you're looking for projects, right? Amber, hey, we have a team. They're going to come in. We need them to solve this problem for our customers. It could be an app, a website, something like that. That is going to be the main solution. And then they work with you as a little mini Scrum team that builds you a product and experiments with something. So it's pretty cool. There's been some pretty cool projects that class has turned out.
Yeah, the students love it. They always learn a lot. They always end up producing amazing things that maybe we didn't expect in the beginning, but our partners are always really happy with. And it's a win-win experience for everyone involved, including me.
Awesome. We will put the link to how to contact you for that, and then we'll put a link to the book in the show notes. Finally, I'm glad that you gave The Princess Bride, the movie, a shout out in your book. And now I'm dying to know, maybe we end on this. Is it really your favorite movie? Did you put that in there because it's your favorite movie, or was it literally just an example?
It's my favorite movie, so I definitely put it in there because of that.
All right, I don't have any clever Princess Bride quotes to end on, but
inconceivable.
Yeah, inconceivable. All right, maybe we'll have to put a Princess Bride meme in the show notes as well, or something like that.
I think
there's plenty of them.
That's a must.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Amber. I'm sure we'll be in touch and we'll talk outside the podcast. But thanks for joining us.
Thank you both for having me on. It's been a great time.
If you found value in today's episode, share this with a friend. Until next time, get agile and stay agile.